Hello everyone, I'm Siddharthan. This is the sixth topic in our complete Python course, and in this topic we are going to discuss about variables in Python. So first let's try to understand what is meant by these variables and what are their uses, and then we can do some programming in Python with some use cases on how you can use these variables and different variations on how this can be used. So this will be the agenda for today's video, and let's get started. So I'm going to work in my Jupyter notebook. I hope that you have already set up your Jupyter notebook or your PyCharm or other IDEs to work on. So now let's talk about these variables. So variables are nothing but you can think about them as containers where you're going to store some data in it. And later this data can be manipulated, changed or updated. So I've just like searched for these variables in Python and there are some images that represents that. So let's say that we have a value of 100 and let's say we want to multiply this 100 with some other value and we have to do a series of calculations. So what we do is we store this value in a variable and later do this calculations or whatever we want to do with that. So if you just see this image, so we have age is equal to 25. So this age is kind of the name we have, right? So the age word, so this is what we call as variable, and we assign a value of 25 to this variable called as ch. So this is how this thing works. So here we have an example of x of 5 where the value is 5 and the variable is x, and later we can again do some calculations, use it somewhere else, and this is how this entire thing works. And you can think about this as variable is nothing but it's going to store some data values in it. Okay, and now let's see how we can work with these variables, or how we can put some values in a variable. So I'll convert this cell to a text cell using this markdown option, and I'll say uh, variable assignment. So we are going to assign a value to a variable, and yeah, I'll run this. So now let's say x is equal to 10, which is a number, right? And I'll say name is equal to John. So this is a string value, which is basically a text. So all the string values should be put within double quotes in Python. So that's why we use this. So if you don't put this, you will get an error. So just put double quotes, or even you can use single quotes as well. So you can mention John like this, or you can just start and end with single quote. So you should not start with single quote and end with double quote. So that consistency should be there. Or let me put this as name is equal to John, and let's say age is equal to 30, and as weight is equal to let's say 75 kg or something, right? And we are going to print these three things. So this first variable that we have name, right? So name is nothing but a string value or a string data type. So I'll just put a hash and write a comment here saying this is a string value. And now we have age. So I'll just give some space here, and this is a integer value, right? And maybe for weight we can put this as 75.5, which is, let's assume that this is in kg. This is a float value. Float value is nothing but decimal value, so we have these three values, and then we can just print this by saying uh, integer value, put a comma and x. So this will first print integer value, and this comma basically adds a space to this and just prints this x. So instead of x, let's put this as name. This, maybe let's have this as string value first in the same order, and then I'm just going to copy this entire thing, paste it three times, and now replace this. So next let's print the integer value, which is represented by age, and then we have this float value or the decimal value. This is represented by weight, and then we have age. Let's run this. So here if you see, we didn't directly print string value John or age, integer value age, or float value weight or something like that. So we didn't do that. Instead, we have stored the name of John in the variable called as name, and we have stored this 30 in a variable called as age, and we have stored this weight 75.5 in a variable called as weight, and later used these variable names to print this. So and later, let's say you want to calculate the BMI of John, you can take this weight value, do the calculations to calculate the BMI, and then like store the BMI in some other value as well. So this is how it's done. So here we have this John, age and weight, and again this represents a string value, this represents an integer value, float value, and so on. And other interesting thing, or I would say the easier thing in Python compared to a programming language like C, is that in the case of C, you need to declare what that particular data type is. So if name is John, you have to say that name is going to be a string. And for age, you have to say that this is going to be an integer. Weight would be a float. So you have to declare all those things at top itself. So the data types of the variable should be declared. But in the case of Python, it automatically detects what's the type of that data, that particular variable is. So we call that as data type. Basically, that represents the type of data, whether it is a string, which is a text kind of a thing, or it is an integer value or a float value. So all these are detected automatically by Python. But as I said, in the case of C programming and other few languages, you need to explicitly declare that name is going to be a string, age is going to be an integer, and weight is going to be, a decimal value, and so on. So this is how you can declare variables or basically assign variables in Python. So I'll copy this entire thing, paste it over here, and here maybe I'll just change this to name. Let's put this as ch, and finally let's just type in weight here. Okay, so instead of just saying name is John, age is 30, weight is 75.5, we are using these variable names to do that thing. And the thing about variables is that the name variable suggests that it can be changed, right? So it can be varied later. So it's not like you shouldn't change that value once you have declared this, or you have like once you have assigned this. So you can also update this variable as well. So now let's say we have printed name, age, weight, and so on, right? So now I can say age is equal to 30. So previously it was 30, so I'll say that age is equal to 40. And now I can print this age as well, updated age. Let's say there is a error or something, the age has been entered wrongly, and now we want to change this. So here I can just say updated age and run this. So previously, as you can see, the name is John, age is 30, 75.5, and later we have updated this using the same variable name. So that's important. And then we have the updated age to be 40. So this is how we can work on this. So this is about updating the variables value. And I just wanted to mention another thing about comments. Again, this is not related to this video, but this can be useful to you. So let's say that you want to comment out some piece of code. So sometimes like we would have a large script, let's say that has like hundreds of lines of code, and you want to comment like 10, 20 lines of code. So one way to do that is you just put a hash at the start of each line, but we can't do that if it's a large amount of lines, right? So what you can rather do is select all these lines and press control and forward slash button. So I'll repeat, control and forward slash. That would comment all these lines. So if I run this, it's not going to print me anything because all these are comments, as all the lines are now starting with hash. So if I select all this again and again press control forward slash, it's going to uncomment all this line. So you can just do this repeated times. So it can comment and uncomment using this control and forward slash. So that's something that you can maybe remember. Okay, so this is how you can update the weights as well. And the other thing about Python is that let's say that here I have this age as 40, and I'm printing this age, let's say it's 40, right? Or maybe I'll put this as 50. Now I'll say age is equal to 70, and again print this age, and it's going to say 70, right? Again, this is not particular to Python, but it's just about Jupyter notebooks. So now the age is 70, and here if I run this, right, so previously the age was 50, we have printed it, and next we have updated the age to 70, and then we have printed it 70. But if you run this previous cell again, it's going to give you 70 because the order that it follows, it's not this ascending order that you see visually, but what's the order that the cell has been executed. So first we had 50, next we had the age of 50 that we have printed. So I'm running this line, and this line it says 50. Now I'm changed this age to 70, and I've printed this. If I go back here, if I run this now, the age is not 50, it's going to take this value 70 because this is the one that has been executed lastly. So it's always going to follow the order in which the cells has been executed last. So the last time we have assigned the value of 70 to this age, so if you print this, it's going to tell you 70, not 50. If you want to update this, you have to start from this particular cell. Again, this is something that's different from what we are discussing, but these are some smaller things, but you might like miss it sometimes. So I just wanted to mention these things as well. But coming back to the topic, so we have this variable assignments that we can store in some variables like name, age, weight, or something like that, and then we can print this, update the value using that same variable name, and so on. So that's about variable assignment, and you know how you can update these variables. And talking about the other uh, thing here, we have something called as constant. So variable is something that its value is going to change, right? But there is a concept of constants whose value shouldn't change. So I'll put this as constants, but these are nothing but just naming conventions. So Python doesn't provide an inbuilt way to create constants. That means like through your execution of the code, the values shouldn't change. But as I said, it doesn't have an inbuilt way or inbuilt type to declare any constants or something like that. So rather, we just follow a naming convention. So that like when some other person looks at your code, if they see this particular naming convention, they know that this is a constant value. Say for example, I'll say pi is equal to 3.141 or something like that, 3.14 maybe, and it's a gravity, which is the acceleration due to gravity. So we know that these are like constant values, this shouldn't change. So it has like some specific set of values to this. So we create those constants using this uppercase letters. So when I say pi, so this p and I are in uppercase letters and gravity is in uppercase letters. So technically these are nothing but variables as the ones that we have in this case, but we when we put that in uppercase letter, it's just a convention of saying that the intention of these values is to behave like a constant whose value shouldn't change later in the code. So that's the purpose. So whenever you want to write something or use something as a constant value, just name them in uppercase letters, and again don't change it in your code. If you want to change it in your code, don't use uppercase letters. So again, this is all about the naming conventions, and it's kind of like the pattern we follow. So whenever you want to create a variable, create it with lowercase letters or even mix of lowercase and uppercase letter. But whenever you are working with constants or you want to work with constants, just create it with uppercase letter. As I said, technically you can change it, but we don't want to change it purposefully, because the purpose of those values is to be constant and don't change along the course of the execution of the script. So here I can say print pi constant, put a comma here, that's going to leave a space, and type in pi, and then gravity, or basically the acceleration due to gravity. So here we'll say gravity constant, and the value is going to be gravity. And I'm mentioning this in uppercase letter, and it will just print this pi constant and gravity constants. For working with some formulas or something, you can use that. So that's about the naming conventions that you can use if you want to use a constant value. And also there are some rules that you can follow while you are naming variables as well. So we'll put this as rules for variables name. Okay, let's understand this. There are like some rules that we have to follow. So you can name a variable with some text, right? So previously we had this name, age, and so on. So here I'll write var, which is like short form for variable, and like I can say the variable value is 5, and I can also say underscore var. So you can also use underscores in the name of the variable, and it can also start with underscore, or you can just use underscore as a variable name itself, so that possible too. Or you can start with the underscore and say variable value is equal to 15 or something, and you can say variable 3 is equal to 20, right? So all these things are possible, and maybe I'll try to print all these things. So we have four things here, right? So let me just change this. So this is underscore, this is underscore var. Again, it doesn't have to be var, it can be any combination of letters. So that's not important. Just for reference, I'm just taking this as var. So this can be a underscore underscore a or something like that as well. You can also have a number at the end of that particular variable name. So I'll run this and it's printing this. So all these are kind of allowed, so you can do this, but you cannot kind of follow something else, like let's say I cannot say 3 underscore variable. So if I just put this 3, it would give me a syntax error. So the variable names shouldn't start with a numerical value, but it can end with a numerical value, but it shouldn't start with a numerical value. So that's going to give you a syntax error. So the next thing that's not allowed is, let's say my hyphen variable is equal to 5. So this is also not allowed. So you cannot use a hyphen in your variable names. That's not allowed. So only special character allowed is underscore. Hence you can say my underscore variable it's equal to, let's say, 80. So this is possible. So you can print this and it's not going to give you any errors or something, right? So these are some of the basic rules that we have to follow. So you can just use some combination of letters. You can use underscore, you can use underscores and some names, and you can use some string value or basically some letters, and then add some numerical values to this. So these are, but you shouldn't start with a value. You shouldn't use hyphen between them. Rather you can use underscore between them. So these are like some of the things that we have to remember while like creating this variable. So whenever you are using this, you're going to get an error. So that's about it. So now let's see how we can assign multiple values to some variables. Let's take like multiple variables and like assign values to them. So convert this to markdown. You can just click here and press your M button, and here I'm going to say multiple assignments. So here I can say this is about dash and say that assigning multiple values in one line. So we are going to say a comma b comma c is equal to 1 comma 2 comma 3, and print a b and print c. So what we are doing is we are just just like basically doing this thing where we assign, let's say we have 3 variables and we have 3 values, right? And we have written this in 3 lines. But in this line we are just like writing this in a simple way, where in single line we are doing this. So when I say a comma b comma c is equal to 1 comma 2 comma 3, a is going to take the value of 1, b is going to take the value of 2, and c is going to take the value of 3. So this you can do for any number of variables, so that shouldn't be a problem. So we have, and then printing a, b and c. So instead of doing this in 3 lines of code, simply we are just like doing this in a single line of code. So this is like one variation of this assigning multiple values in one single line. There is also another way of assigning variables. So this is about assigning the same value. So here we have assigned different values to different variables by using this comma. But now I'm going to do, what I'm going to do is assigning the same value to multiple variables. So I can say x is equal to y is equal to z is equal to 100. And now I'm going to print these 3 things: x, y, and z. And we have 100, 100, 100, and so on. So this is how you can assign same value to multiple variables. But let's say now I'm changing this y value to 50, and again I'm printing this. So this is not going to change the other 2 values of x and z. So that's not going to do this. So only the y value will be changed. So this is how you can assign the same value to all the variables in one single line. But again, if you have to change those values separately, so if you want to change all of those, you have to change those separately, or basically updating the value. So this is how you can assign single value to multiple variables. So this is like one variation. So that's other thing. And we have like one other concept to discuss, and this is like a very important concept, and there is a chance that we would kind of often face this errors when we are like working in a large piece of code. So that's pretty common, and that's about the variable scope. And this is like, you probably would come across this question if you're attending like a interview or something. This is like one of the question that comes up if they want to test your expertise on programming or something. Again, this is a basic stuff, but people usually bring this up in interviews as well, and that is about variable scope. So here I'll convert this to a markdown and call this as variable scope. and it has like two main factors to this. One is a global variable and the other one is local variable. Okay, so let's try to understand this concept. So first I'll write the code and then I'll explain you. So let's say that we have a global variable and I'll call this as, this is a global variable. I mean, this string can be anything. I'm just like using it for easier understanding. So here we have declared a variable called as global variable, or basically assigned it some string value, and I'm writing a function and calling this as sample function. And in the previous keywords video, I've just explained you like a very simple function. So the purpose of function is that you can use it any number of times you want in your code that has like a specific code in its section. So here I'll say local variable is equal to, this is a local variable, and now I'm going to print the local variable and also print the global variable. So this basically we are accessing the global variable within a function. Okay, let's run this and then let's call this function of sample function. So what this has to do is basically print your local variable and global variable. Let's run this and it's printing these two things. One is our global variable and the other one is our local variable. So these two are printed, right? So first we are printing local and the other one is the global. So the name itself kind of tells you that what these two means. Global variable is something that can be used anywhere in the code. So that can be called outside the function and it can be used within the function as well. But a local variable is something that's confined to this function. You cannot call this local variable outside this function. I'll show you. I'll copy this entire thing, paste it again. Now I'll come out of this function and say sample function. So that's going to print my local variable and global variable. And I'll also try to print the local variable outside the function and see what happens. So that's going to print your local variable and global variable. So the line number 8 is executed and we get these two results. But when it tries to run this line number 10, it says local variable is not defined. But we clearly have this in this function, right? So that's what a local variable means. So this variable is kind of accessible only within the function, and outside this function, it's not accessible. So that's the main name difference between them. So we have global variable and the local variable, where the global variable can be accessed anywhere in the code, even within a function. But in the case of local variable, you can access that only in the case of a function. So what happens usually is that we would write these functions, like even a particular script may have like multiple functions, and each function can be called multiple times, and we may sometimes miss that a local variable. Like basically we may think that this is a global variable, but we would have actually used that as a local variable, and we kind of would miss that and think that why is not working. And in those cases we would get this name error saying that it's not defined. And once you look at the code, you would understand that it's because we have not defined that properly, or it's kind of a local variable and we are trying to access it using this global variable. So that's about it. So long story short, the main explanation is that global variable can be accessed anywhere in the code, even within a function or outside a function. But a local variable is something that you can access only within that particular function. So you cannot access it outside the function. So that's about it. So these are the things that I wanted to discuss today about this variables. So we have seen how you can assign values to the variable, and we have seen it's nothing but a container that stores some data which can be later manipulated or even referenced in your code. And then we have seen how we can update this value just by using that same variable name and just putting a different value there. And also seen the naming conventions, like for constant. So if we want to work with constant, again they are going to be technically variables, but we can just say that I want to use this as constant by just using uppercase letters, and this is like again just a simple naming convention that we can follow. And then we have this rules of variable name. So we have seen that we shouldn't start a variable name with a numerical value, and we shouldn't use hyphen or other special characters. Only we can use underscores is kind of permitted. And then we have also seen how you can assign multiple values in one single line, and also how you can assign single value to multiple variables. And finally, the important concept of the variable scope, and also discussed about this global variable and local variable. So I hope that everyone is clear about what we have discussed today. Just please practice this code, so that really helps. And that is all from my side. I'll see you in the next upload. Thanks for watching.